Hey everyone, welcome back to the Gaining Health Podcast. I'm your host, Carly Burridge, and today I am very excited to have with me Dr. Sylvia Bollie. She is a double board certified and body positive weight and wellness physician expert, best-selling author and creator and CEO of Embrace You Weight and Wellness. And she personally connects to that journey, having lost 60 pounds of baby weight twice and maintained her weight loss for over 7 years through her personalized, holistic, and scientific weight loss strategy. She's had well over 10,000 patient encounters and has helped hundreds of patients reach their weight loss goals through her down-to-earth, holistic, personalized approach to scientific and sustainable weight loss. So in 2020, during the pandemic, while working in the front line, she launched Embrace You Weight and Wellness program to equip women who've struggled with weight with her secrets to personalized and sustainable weight loss. And in addition to passionately serving women on their weight and wellness journey, Dr. Bollie regularly speaks on the flaws of BMI, especially as it relates to Black women and wellness, and the need for personalized obesity evaluation, PCOS, self-love, and overcoming weight bias. And she's also released the best-selling book in 2021, Embrace You, Your Guide to Transforming Weight Loss Misconceptions into Lifelong Wellness. And recently, I got to see her at the OMA conference where she was induced on the board of trustees. So congratulations to you. It's so good to see you again.
Thank you, Carly. Wow. Look, it's always weird when you hear your own bio being read. I was like, oh, wonderful.
I know you've done so
Well,
much,
thank
and
you
that
for that
doesn't
warm
even sum it all
introduction.
up. There's so much to unpack and talk about, which is why I'm so
Oh
glad
my
that you're here.
gosh. Thank you. Thank you. I'm grateful. Thanks for the invitation. It's always good. We had a fun run. So the fun run is one of the traditions during the conference, and Carly led it, and it was great.
Oh, it was all,
So we got
that's
to
something
connect on that
I've been
too.
doing that for a while now with OMA, and I always dread it in some ways because it's so early in the morning. And I'm always like,
I
oh my
know.
gosh, we have to get up so early. But then we do it, and it's always so much fun. And like we talked about when we were there, you never regret it. You never regret getting out and moving your
Mhm.
body, especially at these conferences when you're sitting all day long. So even though the alarm clock in the
Exactly.
morning is always a little bit of a shocker, it's always so much fun to do it.
For sure.
So, if you don't mind, could we start with your personal journey? Because I know this is something you openly talk about on your website and you share your story, but can you share your personal story with our listeners and kind of let us know how you got involved in obesity management and all of that?
Yeah. For sure, for sure. So my story actually starts with my
Okay.
grandmother, my grandma Sylvia. Yes, so she was like the matriarch of our family. I didn't meet her till I was 8 years old because she lived in Liberia, West Africa, and so I had heard all these, wonderful stories like about how she was an entrepreneur, an educator, and she's just like this, like larger than life person. So when I fast forward to when she came to the United States, she lived with us, but by that time, her health had been like totally decimated by diabetes, hypertension, glaucoma. She couldn't see. And when we took her to the doctor, he blamed it on her weight. She was a large, voluptuous woman and probably would meet the criteria for obesity. Of course, at 8, I didn't know that.
Right.
And so he blamed it on her weight. And how I internalized this as a young person was that you don't want to gain weight because it can ruin your life. You won't be who you are. And so I developed probably what today we call a fat phobia. But at the same time, I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia, to parents who were restaurateurs. So there was always good food around, right? Whether it be West African food or good Southern cuisine, fried chicken, mac and cheese. So, so it would go between these two extremes, being a child of the 80s, 90s, where you're like overindulging in all this rich processed food, and then really strict dieting. Like, oh, okay, I did too much, so now I have to diet. And that kind of was the song and dance I did for most of my life. And I thought I was healthy because I did that. And because I was thin, I was lean. But a lot of that leanness probably had to do with just the fact that I was young,
Right.
right? And that I was, um, and that my genetics hadn't caught up. And so when I had got pregnant with my son, this was during residency. So for those who don't know, you go to, as doctors, we go through med school, we go through residency, and then at the end of it, got pregnant with my son. It was like one of the most stressful times of my year. Like they're always like, the best time to have a baby is during third year of residency. There is no best time.
No.
Like you're always, yeah, it was so stressful. So I was just like trying to survive. I remember my doctor, my OB-GYN saying to me, like, Sylvia, you really need to exercise. And I said, Dr. Jackson, my life is exercise.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I just felt like I was constantly running, constantly going, trying to please everybody, trying to get to my, like, make it to my due date so that I could have the full 6 weeks of maternity leave. Like, you know how slow I want to stay with my baby the whole time. Well, what ended up happening, I ignored the warning signs. I was gaining 5 pounds a week towards the end of my pregnancy. I had gained 40 really early on, and then the at last part, I was gaining 5 pounds a week. And it turns out I had preeclampsia, but it was like a weird form where it was late. I didn't have high blood pressure, but I was just so tired, so swollen, and I just kept working because I had this deadline to meet. I wanted to please everyone around me. I was then being groomed to be chief resident, so a leader in the residency program. Like, I can't show weakness. I got to keep going. And what it ended up happening, I ended up having an emergency C-section, and then just being down for 3 extra weeks in addition to the 6 weeks that was planned. And that was a really, really tough time. And you would think that would be my wake up call to take better care of myself and like prioritize. But no, I still continue with my people pleasing, perfectionism. And then how I cope with that was stress eating when I went back to work. So I like to say my weight gain triggers are cheap pizza and sleep
Yeah.
deprivation. So I that's because that's how I got through. And really, the wake up call wasn't until 2 years postpartum. I was just feeling really, really heavy. Like I was feeling really heavy, and I still had like 40 extra pounds with me. And that was when I tried to go back to dieting because that's what I knew. That's what I even learned in med school was the thing to do, calories in, calories
Right.
out, right?
Eat
That's
less,
how you
move
lose
more,
weight.
right?
Yeah, exactly. That's what we learned. And so when I tried to do that, I failed because, like, at this point, I'm like seeing patients. I have like a 14-hour work day. When I come home from that, then I have a very demanding 2-year old to take care of. My husband was commuting, so he was getting home from late from work. So I was like, how am I going to keep a food log, then exercise an hour when I come home? So, like, 1 week after this, I just felt like an utter failure. And I was confiding in one of my girlfriends. We always have that friend that you always diet with and, talk
Right.
about weight with. And so she was like, and I expected her to give me a shake or a smoothie plan or something like that. And she said something that was really profound that I really, in all the years of dieting and all the years of achievement, I had never thought about. But she was like, be nice to Sylvia. I like her.
Yeah.
Be nice to Sylvia. I like her. And I realized the way I was treating myself, the way I was talking to myself, I would never talk to my child like that. I would never talk to my friends like that. No one like that. So that was like the spark for me to really change my approach to my body, change my approach to weight loss, to wellness, from to come from a perspective of self-love and being a spiritual person. God and I are best friends. Like God, so like God was like, I'm not going to let you make a positive change with a negative mindset. No more of that anymore. So that positive mindset really opened my eyes that I had not learned in med school what I needed to know about weight loss. And so that's when I discovered the Obesity Medicine Association, went to my first fundamentals of obesity course. It was like, this is great. Hallelujah. I've seen the light. It all
Yes.
connects. It all makes sense. And so I joined, and then I got involved in the committees and have been involved now over 7 years, and that great people like Carly. And so it's been a wonderful experience. But I mean, I think the combination of self love plus personalized science, knowing that it's not a one size fits all approach. It's not as simple as just calories in versus calories out, eat less, move more, has been so important, not just in transforming my own life, and showing me what are the tools I need to maintain what I call a happy, healthy weight, but also how I can help other people. And that's really been the catalyst in all of this.
Yeah, and I think your story is so relatable for so many people. Starting with the fact that I do think it's so important that we learn to treat ourselves like we would treat somebody we love. So we have to love ourselves first and treat
Yeah.
ourselves with love first. And that's often the first step and the hardest step. When we're talking to our patients about all of this is, listen to your own self-talk. Oftentimes it's so negative.
Mhm.
They're beating themselves up and, just working on having more positive self-talk and really loving yourself enough that you're doing this out of love for yourself, not out of punishment to yourself. Because so often it
Yeah.
seems like we get these messages about weight loss and weight management, and it's just to like beat ourselves up. Like we've done something bad. We're bad for eating these foods. We're bad for having this
Mhm.
disease. And now we need to punish it out of ourselves. Like so often that's the message. And
Oh,
I think we see that in the media so often. When you look at some of the shows like The Biggest Loser, when you see the trainers yelling at people and just, the words that we hear from our patients, that of the stories that they have, of things that people say to them, sometimes just walking down the street, or sometimes even things that they hear from their own healthcare providers. It's,
yeah.
it's soul crushing. And so I think you're so right. Like it has to start with that and it has to come from a place of love. And as healthcare providers, it's so important that we show our patients that, and that, we
Mhm.
exemplify that, and that we are welcoming them in our space in a way that they feel welcome and loved, and we're happy to see them regardless of the number of the scale or where they went up or down. Like we're just happy to see them because of who they are, and we're there to celebrate their achievements and what they've accomplished that week. And even if the only accomplishment was showing up that day, right? Even if everything else quote unquote went wrong that month, there's always things
Yeah.
to celebrate. And I think just focusing on that is so important. And also your story just about your pregnancy, I think speaks to me so much, because personally I was in my second year or my last year of PA school when I was pregnant with my
Mm.
daughter, my first pregnancy. And it was the same thing. And the people pleasing, I think that's another thing that we really have to
Mhm.
try to get over and put ourselves first. I remember I was in my end of my first trimester, beginning of my second. So I was still pretty nauseous and tired and feeling awful. And I had my ER rotation, and they were all 12-hour night shifts. And there wasn't even a
Wow.
place for me to sit because we had, several students and residents. And I didn't want people to even know that I was pregnant, because I didn't want to get treated differently. I didn't want to have to
Mhm.
ask, hey, can I step out and get something to eat real quick, because I haven't eaten in 8 hours and I'm pregnant and I'm tired. And I felt like, no, I can't let people know. I don't want to look like the weak one. So I just kept
Mhm.
going. And yeah, also I gained 60 pounds with each of my pregnancies. And
Mm.
it was really hard. And we're so hard on ourselves. And I remember coming to my OBGYN visits, like my third trimester, and they were like, you can't gain any more weight. It's like I still have a whole trimester to go. I'm not trying
And
to.
like, you have control over
Right.
it. Like, I mean, the advice we give pregnant
Ah,
women where they're already so stressed out and carried in, I mean, and that's why I talk a lot about these uncontrollable versus controllable weight
yeah.
gain triggers. I think during pregnancy, your body is in a obesogenic state,
Yeah.
if you will, but it is in a fat storage state, right? Because that is the function of the vital organ of fat, right? To hormonally support your body plus this growing life inside of you. So, yes, I do believe, like, yes, to the best of your ability, do what you can do. So, maybe instead of just focusing on the weight gain, we can ask, what's the story behind the number? Like, why is this weight going up? Is it a medical cause? Like, preeclampsia. I'm grateful, like, even though my blood pressure wasn't elevated, really, I have to give my doctor, Dr. Jackson, credit because she ordered a 24-hour urine test because she was so concerned about the rapidity, how rapidly I was gaining weight because actually none of the standard tests were showing up. I think there was like a faint trace of protein in the urine during one. And then she said, let's do a 24-hour, which was very insightful. But somebody else might have just said, okay, Black woman, pregnant, gaining weight. Oh, eat less, move
Right.
more. Without asking even about stress, without asking about access to healthy foods, without asking about knowledge base. So I think to your point, we really need to really make sure that we're asking about more than just looking at that number and taking it at face value and say, don't gain weight. But what's the story behind it? And can you really control this weight gain? Because sometimes people can't. I mean, every woman in my family, even if I hadn't had preeclampsia, they gain a lot of weight. That is the main obesity trigger in my family, or weight gain trigger in my family, is pregnancy. And for a lot of Black women too, and women in general, that is going to be the trigger that does put you at risk for obesity, because you never lose that pregnancy weight. And so I think it's important to have this conversation and discussion.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I know for myself, I mean, the I gained 60 pounds in my first pregnancy, which I kind of attributed to, well, I was in school, I wasn't sleeping. We had to eat the food that was
Hmm.
available in the physician's
Hmm.
lounge, which was awful. It was all fried foods and stuff like that.
Always.
But I gained the same amount of weight with my second child. And I wasn't in that
Yes.
situation. And so I do know that
Hmm.
I have a lot of diabetes in my family. And we know that pregnancy is a
Mm.
natural state of insulin resistance, right? Which is
Yes.
why we screen for
Yeah.
gestational diabetes. And I never got to the point where I did have where I developed gestational diabetes, but I have no doubt that I was probably very insulin resistant during that time. I know in college, when I first moved to the US, I gained about 30 pounds in a year, despite being an athlete and being more active than I had ever been in my
Mhm.
entire life. And I
Mm.
developed acanthosis. And I just thought, I was like, how can my neck and my armpits possibly be dirty? I shower like 3 or 4 times a day because I was in Arizona. So you're always sweating. And I didn't know at the time what that was. So, I think for a lot of
Mm.
women, especially if you're prone to insulin resistance, and this is a time when your body is
Mhm.
supposed to naturally become insulin resistant, like a lot of
Mhm.
people just put on a lot of weight during that time. And like you said, it's important.
Mhm.
Yes, we want to discuss it because there are risk factors associated with that.
Absolutely.
But we also just don't want to write it off as, well, she's probably just eating ice cream every night and doing this, that, and the other. No, let's have a
Mhm.
conversation about it and understand that everybody is different and that people are going to respond
Right.
differently to pregnancy and all of that. So, yeah.
Carly, could I just say one thing too? I know, sorry, because like, look, we have got on total roll, but you said something saying that I think is a key point. Same with like you. So I gained 60 pounds both pregnancies. The first pregnancy, yes, I was not exercising, I was eating whatever. But the second one, to your point, by then I was 5 years into my wellness journey and my weight loss journey. So you can follow it on Instagram, and I don't lie on social media. So I put it out there. I was running to up until 7 months, walking up until my due date, eating kale, like doing most of the things, and I still gained 60
Right.
pounds. Now, the difference this time, I think I did not develop preeclampsia during the second pregnancy. And because I think I had such a healthier pregnancy in terms of what I could control, I lost the weight in 7 months this time, as opposed to 3 years the first time. So I think it is important to control what you can, even if you might still gain all those that way, but at least it can help with the postpartum process a little bit more too. Also, didn't struggle as much with postpartum anxiety during this second pregnancy too, and that could have been a factor of just knowing what those triggers were and being able to optimize my wellness during that time.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And, like you said, sometimes we don't have much control over the weight that we gain, but then, as we get out of that pregnancy phase, what can we do? And certainly being gentle with ourselves. I always tell women, look, it took you 10 months to make this baby and gain this weight. Take at least that much time. Give your body at least that much time to see where you get to, just naturally doing the healthful things and being active, but being kind and gentle with yourself at the same time, because especially around that time, as we know, like there's just so much going on. You're not sleeping. And especially when you got two of them, there's just, it's hard to, like you said, we have to let go of perfectionism. I know that's something that you're really big on.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So, tell us a little bit about the book that you wrote. So, your book, Embrace You, your guide to transforming weight loss misconceptions into lifelong wellness. What are some of the misconceptions that you think are most common amongst just the general public, but also healthcare providers? And tell us about your book a little.
Ooh. I know, which is why I had to write. Thank you for the opportunity to talk
Of
about it.
course.
Yeah, well, I hear so many of them, having personally been on the journey. And then once I saw the light and I became an obesity specialist, I was just struck by how many of my colleagues still believed a lot of these things. So one is like, so every chapter of the book starts with the mindset shift. So release perfectionism, embrace progress. That's like the preface of the book. But then it's release, I have to weigh what the BMI says, and embrace, I have my own unique, happy, healthy weight, and taking it. So every chapter, I present the science and the evidence in a very relatable type of way, but then leave you with an empowerment tool at the end so that you can individualize the information for yourself. So it's meant to be like an interactive book, and then eventually I'm going to have a course to go along with it as well too, where people can really work alongside, because the whole goal of this is to find out what works for you. And I just hear a lot, so many things, like even talking about I have to go on a diet to lose weight, or like I can actually enjoy food and still lose weight. Like so, some of these things to just make sure people have the tools they need to not just lose weight but feel good in the process.
I love that. And I love that it's actionable too, because, it's like you get this great information and sometimes it's hard to translate that now. How can I actually apply this to my life? So I love that you're making it actionable and that we'll have courses and things to follow up with that. So people can really take the information and then do something with it. So I love that. That's so amazing. And so one of the things that you talk about a lot is about BMI. And you recently wrote a tweeted that said BMI is trash, full stop. And that tweet received 26,500 likes and over 3,000 retweets. And subsequently, you wrote an article on Medscape titled "When Do We Stop Using BMI to Diagnose Obesity?" So let's dive into that a little bit.
Sure. Well, I wish I could take credit for that tweet. None of my tweets in life have ever been that popular.
I was gonna say that's a
I wish.
lot.
Yeah, no, it was not me. Someone else tweeted
Okay.
that, and then I, just saw it. I wish I had done it, but no, one day, but that's not my ministry yet. So, but yeah, but I just found it profound though. So I think it was actually a PhD who tweeted that, and it just blew up. It got so many responses, and I really enjoyed the comments. Oh my goodness. So you mentioned earlier on things that people say, right, to people that are larger. So a lot of weight bias. So weight bias is negative or derogatory comments to people because of their weight. So there was a lot of weight bias in in the comments. And then there were just a lot of, I could tell there was a lot of misinformation about it. Then there were people on the other extreme who were like, yeah, BMI is nothing and we don't even need to look at weight as a health indicator, blah, blah, blah. And so I was like, okay. So when Medscape approached me, because I had written previous commentaries for them before, when they approached me, I was like, this is the topic I want to talk
Yeah.
about. I know, because, there's only 270 characters you can put in a tweet.
Right.
Plus, I told you 26,000 people are not reading my tweets. I have about 4,000 followers on Twitter. So, yeah. But it was, so in the article, I really just kind of go through the history of the BMI, body mass index, and what was in its initial intention in use. Because, I mean, a lot of people don't realize that the origin for this calculation for body mass index, which is, weight divided by height in meters squared. So weight in kilograms divided by height in meters squared. The origin of it comes from 1832, Carly. So like 1832. And it was not even a physician. It was an anthropologist. He was just making an observation about the Belgian people. So like, and so he kind of filed this away. And then fast forward, Dr. Ansel Keys, who's a physiologist and who was like the father of what we call modern nutrition, he really was interested in finding a way to standardize our insurance system that was basically making determinations about people how their insurance coverage for people based on their weight. But it was very arbitrary how they were setting these up. They had these life tables and they would set it up. People excluded from those life tables: women, Black people, minorities. So, so there's a lot of people who were not even taken into account from the original calculation, and then much less once we these life tables. So Ansel Keys Dr. Ansel Keys normalized using this calculation, which he named the body mass index, later adapted by the World Health Organization, the NIH. All of that happened about 1985. And so fast forward, we've been able to see there's a lot of flaws in it. Like, it's really has limitations in terms of age. It has limitations in terms of race, ethnicity, in terms of biological sex, in terms of muscle mass or body composition. And the fundamental flaw in it is the fact that it looks at total body weight and it's not looking at body composition, which all of these factors play a role in. So I think it's important for us to understand what those limitations are and what that means when we're setting goals for people in their care, right? For the most part, yes, obesity is a very complex disease, but the screening tool that we use for it most commonly is the body mass index. That's what CMS has set out for us. And then what we should also be using, ideally, is a waist circumference, but that's very underutilized, right? So if people don't understand that this screening tool has these flaws in it, we see it lead to further health disparities, in my opinion, of for other people. Like, for instance, Black women have the highest rate of obesity, of overweight and obesity. But if you look at, for instance, Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford's adjusted BMI scale for race, ethnicity, and obesity related conditions, most Black women, the standard BMI where we would start labeling them, not labeling, but start to say, consider that they have obesity, would be a BMI of 31 if you have no risk factors, or if you have insulin resistance, actually it would be 33 would be the cutoff. So that makes you think, like, okay, is it really that it's disproportionately high, or that there's a flaw in the screening tool and it needs to be adjusted?
Right.
So I'll stop there because that's a mouthful. And I know you probably have some questions, but
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean,
I'm
there's
on my
so much more
soapbox.
to dive
So
into there, but I think you're right. Like, BMI it's a screening tool. It's not a diagnostic tool, and there are
Mhm.
better diagnostic tools that we have available. Waist circumference being an easy one that we can do in the office. Other tools that I
Mhm.
hope will be covered by insurance someday soon is the bioelectric impedance body
Mhm.
composition analysis, because as
Yes.
obesity specialists, that's what we're treating. If we can't even measure what we're treating excess adiposity. And not just that, we want to know where that
Yes.
excess fat is, because healthy subcutaneous tissue is very different than having adipose
Mhm.
tissue or fat tissue in the viscera or in organs where we're not supposed to be storing fat. So if this is what we're treating, and we're also very interested in muscle mass, right? Because that's also a very important part of all
Mhm.
of this. So if that's what we're treating, but we can't
Yes.
even measure it, like, what other field of medicine can we think of where we can't even measure what we're treating, right? It just again shows the
Exactly.
again comes back to weight bias and stigma, that the fact that we can't even have a tool to measure what we're actually treating and have it be covered by insurance. So I think the field of obesity medicine is just at its beginning stages, and it's exciting to see, and
Yes.
hopefully we'll see it progress, hopefully faster and sooner rather than later. But I think it's commentaries like yours helping people become more aware of where these numbers come from and what they mean, and what importantly what they don't
Mhm.
mean, and just really
Yes.
individualizing treatment for each person. And I love how you talk about having somebody having their healthy and best weight for them, not based on some number on
Mhm.
the scale or a BMI or something like that. So I know
I
that we
love
could
that.
probably talk about this all day, and I hope that maybe you'll come back again in the future so we can continue this
Absolutely.
conversation. But lastly, we'll finish. Is there anywhere? Can you share us a little bit about where people can find you, how they can learn more about you and what you're doing?
Yes, yes, yes. Well, thank you so much, first of all, Carly, for a great discussion. And you're right. You know how we talk. We could talk for hours, literally, about this topic. So I think it's so important. I just want to remind, like you said, that what the BMI does not say. The BMI is not a judgment of who you are as a person. It is not a judgment of your worth. It's not a judgment of your work ethic or your achievements and accomplishment in the world. And I just want everyone who's listening to just always remember, you are beautiful, you are unique, and that your worth is far greater than your weight. And your weight does not define you. So thank you for the opportunity to have this discussion. Anyone wants to connect with me, check me out at my website, embraceyouvellness.com. That's embraceyouvellness.com. And the Y is YOU spelled out. And I'm sure you'll have it
Yes,
in the
I
show
will put
notes.
all of this in the show
Okay.
notes as well. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So yeah, so look forward to connecting. And there's always some freebie up there that can help them, a webinar or something, because I love to educate and empower people with what they need to know about themselves.
Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on today. And thank you for everything you do. I love your message. I always love talking to you. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you in person again soon, too, at another OMA conference.
Yes, I will see you in New
Uh,
York, God willing.
all right. Take
All
care.
right, bye, Carly. Take care.
Bye.
You too. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Gaining Health podcast. Don't forget to review and subscribe. And if you really liked it, consider supporting us on Patreon. Lastly, if you need resources and tools to help you start an obesity management program, be sure to check out gaininghealth.com. Thank you, and we'll see you next time on the Gaining Health podcast.